Assalamualaikum everyone. I'm Anam, an artist, illustrator and designer. Welcome to my workspace. Today I'll show you how to draw a hijabi character in Procreate. I am using my iPad Pro 4th Gen and my Apple Pencil. I'm using the app Procreate. This is the character that we'll be drawing today. It's a hijabi faceless character. It's holding a heart. It's very sweet, simple and full of texture. Don't worry, I'll guide you through the process and you'll be able to create it in no time. Before we begin, let me walk you through the brushes I'll be using today. These are all the free brushes and included in the Procreate, so you don't have to download anything else. I'll be using 6B pencil for sketching. It's textured but precise. Then I'll be using wine charcoal brush. It's perfect for coloring and adding a natural textured look. My go-to for line art is ink bleed. It gives a lovely, slightly imperfect edge. And then I'll use concrete block to add depth and dimension to large areas like hijab or dress. I'll also use Ultrafine Nozzle Spray. I will use this to color the line arts. It's subtle but makes a big difference. Let's start sketching. I'm using gray color from the palette and 6B pencil. I'll draw a rough semicircle for the head, and on top of that a flat circle kind. This will become the face of the character. Next, sketch an elongated oval from the top of the head to create the hijab. I'll extend that hijab and let it flow naturally at the back, and for the folds of the hijab I will add a few curved lines. These don't need to be perfect. This is just a rough sketch and you can just play around with it, because after this rough sketch we'll do a clean line art. Then we'll draw, after the hijab is done, we'll draw one arm reaching forward to hold a heart. Now we'll draw heart. We'll sketch the heart carefully as it's the focal point of the design. Finally, once we are done with drawing or sketching the heart, we'll sketch the dress and the legs or the pants of the character. At this point we'll also add the another hand of the character, because it's also holding the heart from other hand. After you have sketched your character, and if you feel your proportions are off, you can use the selection tool to tweak them. Don't rush, take this part slowly because it is the foundation of our character. Once you are satisfied with your design, then you can proceed to the next step, that will be the clean line art. Once our sketch looks good, we'll lower its opacity and create a new layer for line art. I'm using the ink bleed brush for this. It's slightly textured, which gives a hand-drawn feel. Go over your sketch slowly. This is where your character starts to take shape. Remember, it's okay if it's not perfect. The charm lies in the imperfection. It's just a hijabi cartoon character, so it needs not to be perfect. It's just the imperfection will also make it beautiful. And I don't know, I have mentioned it in the video before, but this is our faceless character, because I believe I mostly draw faceless characters. It's my personal choice, so it's going to be super easy. At this part, I will recommend to name your layers. So like I'm naming this final line art as final sketch. Now for my favorite part, adding color. I don't use the color drop tool because I love the textured hand colored effect. So we'll create a new layer under the line art or final sketch and name it hijab. And I'm using the wine charcoal brush. I'll color the hijab with small strokes as you would with the real charcoal. Create a layer below the hijab for the undercap and repeat the process. And we are using the same wine charcoal brush set at the smallest setting. Below that, add a layer for face and hands. Use soft strokes to fill these areas. As you can see, as we are going down, our layers are just going below the final sketch because we are working from top to bottom. So first we have final sketch, then the hijab, then the undercap, and then the face and hands. After this we'll have heart, then dress and pants. Now we'll create a layer for the heart and use bright red. As we know that Apple Pencil is pressure sensitive, so when you keep it straight, it will color small areas, and when you give it a slight tilt, it will cover the larger areas. So Apple Pencil is very wonderful to work with. Now as you can see that I have tilted my pencil and it started covering a bigger areas, and again I straightened up and started giving small strokes. So Apple Pencil is very good to work with, but it's not necessary. iPad or Apple Pencil are not necessary. You can create this illustration in any other digital art app like Ibis Paint, Infinite Painter or High Paint. We'll create a new layer for our dress. This layer will be below the heart layer, and we'll color our dress using the same wine charcoal brush. I love this method of coloring it. It does take some time as compared to the drop-in tool, but it gives a beautiful texture and more depth to your illustration. Attach the color palette and the sketch in the description box below. Please feel free to download it and follow along with me. Your creations on my Instagram. My Instagram handle is Anam Usmani Hassan as mentioned on the screen here. It's also linked in the description box below. Flat colors can feel lifeless, so let's add texture for depth. For hijab, I'll use the concrete block brush and add a darker shade where shadows would fall, like near the folds. Then add a lighter shade where the light hits. I love this concrete block texture brush because it gives such a beautiful texture. It makes your illustration pop. So for applying texture, what I did is I went on the hijab layer and created a layer on top of it and made that layer, the new layer, as a clipping mask on the hijab. So when I added texture, it remained on my hijab and didn't went out or made a mess. So now I'm adding texture to my undercap, and the same way I'm using a darker shade to create shadow and lighter shade to create a light or maybe highlighted effect. Now for adding texture to my face and heart, I'm using wine charcoal, and the same process repeats here as well. I used wine charcoal here because I feel like the concrete block here would have been very harsh, and I wanted my heart and the face to have a light soft texture to it. So on the edges or the portions which are held by the character's hand, I'm adding darker red, and on the side which is I feel is in the light, I'm adding light shade of red. Now for the dress again, I am using the concrete block and the same process of clipping mask. See how beautiful this gave. My dress was looking flat before, but when I added this texture using the concrete block, it came out so beautiful, like my character's dress has some fold or some design. Now using the same concrete block, I'll add texture to the pants of the character. Use alpha lock in place of clipping mask, but personally I feel clipping mask works for me and it helps keep everything clean and within the boundaries. Now let's make the illustration pop more with shadows and highlights. Create a new layer above the colors and set it to linear burn for shadows, and using the 6B pencil with a gray shade to add soft shadows where folds or overlaps occur, we'll adjust the opacity for a natural look. You'll be wondering that why again I'm adding shadows when I already did it with the texture. So with the texture our shadows are very subtle, but at some points we want some hard shadows that will give our character a defined look, like here below the heart and below the arms. So we add these shadows which will define and add more dimension and depth to our character. After we are done with the shadows, we'll merge the layer with the color layer and create a new layer for highlights. I'll use a very light or bright yellow with the wine charcoal brush to add light accents. Focus on areas where the light would naturally hit, like the edges of the hijab or the heart and the palms and the front of the dress and the pants. See how beautiful and dimensional our character is looking now. Here we are done with our highlights, and we'll merge this layer with the colored illustration and create a new layer to give this blushed effect on our character. I have used the wine charcoal brush and blurred it out slightly with Gaussian blur. This will keep it subtle and natural. Next, let's color the line art, which is our final step. We'll create a layer above the line art and set it as clipping mask, and use the Ultrafine Nozzle Spray brush. Match the colors to their respective areas. For example, use a darker blue for the hijab lines and a deep red for the heart lines. This ties everything together beautifully. You can leave your outlines or line art as black, but I prefer more of a colored look because I think it ties everything together and it gives a more refined look. So I just color the line art, but if you are not comfortable with coloring it, you can just leave it as it is. And here is a finished hijabi character. I love how the textures and colors bring her to life. If you would like a tutorial on creating backgrounds, let me know in the comments. Thanks for drawing with me, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Have a good day. Don't forget to subscribe and like my video if you like it. Bye bye.